Hello and welcome to this Serial Geek TV episode commentary for The Girl from Cap's Past, an episode of Captain America produced by Grant Ray Lawrence Animation and the Marvel Comics Group. So yes, here I go once again, jumping into the world of the Marvel Superheroes cartoon show from 1966. 1966, you gads, 59 years ago, but let's not dwell on that too much, lest we go mad. I'll start off by saying that this is one of my favourite episodes of the series. Firstly, because it so beautifully showcases the man out of time that Steve Rogers is. And secondly, because this episode has one of my favourite villains in it, but we'll get to him later. I always love the idea of Captain America being a lonely man, unable to connect not only with the modern world, but also the people in it. Don't get me wrong, I want the man to have friends, but yeah, it just gives so much depth to a character that could easily fall into the trappings of the perfect all-American superhero, the one possessing no weaknesses whatsoever.
Almost on the verge of panic.
I do like that the documentary on TV highlights an unanswered question relating to the end of the war on the day of victory itself. Why did Captain America look distraught? Which leads us into the titular Girl from Cap's Past, Peggy Carter, quite possibly one of the most memorable females of the modern Marvel Cinematic Universe. The storm here is a wonderful way to transition from the modern day, well, the modern day of the 1960s to the 1940s. I should say that with these Marvel superhero shows, the storyboards were often quite a mixture. You would assume that Xeroxed comic book panels, the ones that end up on screen, were used in the boards, and yes, in many cases they were, but there was also a surprising amount of original storyboard artwork, often very loose sketches, but enough to drive the visual narrative along and guide the director as to what should end up on screen. There's some great action here showing the true chaos of war, and yes, even though we're looking at static comic book panels, the Jack Kirby artwork, the use of animation, the sound effects and the music really make these sequences come to life. Such fury. And it's awesome when Captain America soon leaps into battle and of course, powered by the super soldier serum, really does change the course of the fight. So, a little bit of background on this story. As was sometimes the case with these cartoons from the 1966 Marvel Superheroes show, the producers found themselves having to play around with the continuity of the actual publications these stories were lifted from in order to make them work in the structure of an animated show. As a result, the first of these three parts that form this episode is taken from Tales of Suspense, issue 77. Towards the end of this first part of the episode, the story begins pulling from issue 75, with parts 2 and 3 using 75 and 76 of Tales of Suspense respectively. I hope that made sense. In short, 77, then 75, then 76. This is because in the comic book telling of this story, we are introduced to this mysterious female in the present day, and when the adventure is over, issue 77 reveals how Captain America once kind of knew her 2 decades earlier. That structure really wouldn't make sense in a cartoon like this. One piece of dialogue that always makes me chuckle because it's so dated is Captain America's line that the war isn't woman's work, even though by this point the mysterious girl, Peggy Carter, had already proven herself to be highly proficient in both combat and the use of firearms. One has to realise that this wasn't Stan Lee and Jack Kirby being sexist. They were the ones writing strong females after all. This is simply to show how overprotective Steve Rogers is being, going so far as to utter words that he himself did not believe. Looking at the visuals, when I was about 10 years old, I so badly wanted to see more of these 1966 Marvel superheroes shows. And obviously, back in 1987, even though I'd seen some, I hadn't seen them all. Though, even as a 10-year-old, I was such a fan of the old comics thanks to publications like Marvel Saga detailing the stories from the 1960s that I kind of had a good idea which comic books had probably been animated. Even so, I remember illustrating a fight between the Hulk and Hercules, doing my best Jack Kirby impression. I dread to think what the artwork looked like, but I even cut out separate limbs so that I could have my drawings move like these cartoons. There, I think I've come up with yet another reason why I love these cartoons so much. They were, creatively speaking, aspirational. Going back to the story in Tales of Suspense, in a part we don't see in this cartoon, captured and imprisoned, Peggy Carter shows great defiance, speaking back to her Nazi oppressors. I will also say that this show did shy away from Nazi symbolism. All the Nazi imagery, including Hitler himself, was altered for the show.
How can I ever find her?
All this noise? What does it mean?
This is such a heartbreaking moment for Captain America. He, alongside his allies, arrives, but sadly, Peggy Carter is nowhere to be found. And it's also heartbreaking for we, the audience, as we see that she is so close, and yet... So, as I mentioned before, we're now entering issue 75 of Tales of Suspense, and before too long we'll be seeing The Secret Empire. In the earliest days of Marvel Comics, they were one of those shadowy groups that popped up from time to time. From what I recall, and it's been a long time since I recall all of their tie-ins, they were what we come to know today as Hydra.
It is the most destructive element of all time.
In this episode, they're attempting to secure Inferno 42, and in order to achieve their goal, they hire... No, actually, I'm not going to say his name yet. And in an episode of the Hulk cartoon, they hire the villain known as Boomerang to steal the Air Force's Orion missile, but brave Major Talbot stops Boomerang from succeeding. But that is a commentary for another time. So yeah, as I've described, the Secret Empire usually hire villains to do their dirty work for them, and in this episode, they hire, as we're about to see in a rather marvellous reveal, wait for it,
No one is powerful enough to fight the international secret force of S.H.I.E.L.D.
No one except Batroc.
yes, Batroc the Leaper. He's genuinely one of my favourite villains from the Marvel Universe. There's something about his lack of powers but legendary bravado. I think it's primarily this cartoon that made me fall in love with the character, but also, long before seeing this episode, I had an issue of Captain America, a very memorable issue, with an incredibly striking cover showing Batroc aiming a kick directly at Captain America, who is simply standing there with his arms crossed. I always remember the issue number 2, 303. It's just certain issues always stick in your brain.
New age. But as long as danger beckons, there is still need for Captain America. I'm beginning to talk to myself. I've got to get out.
And here we have Steve Rogers having a good chat with himself. In fairness, it's very good dialogue in which he actually muses that maybe Captain America is the reality and Steve Rogers is the legend, our hero having a real crisis of identity here. The good thing about this scene is that Steve Rogers himself does remark that he's beginning to talk to himself, which prompts him to actually leave the apartment and get some fresh air. Also, I get that Steve Rogers is in peak physical condition, but are his shoulders really that wide enough that when clothed he can hide his shield under his jacket? That seems like a stretch, both figuratively and literally. And now Steve Rogers stumbles upon a familiar face, or so he thinks. This is actually Peggy's niece, Sharon Carter. I think there's been some retconning over the years, but at this point in the Marvel Universe, Sharon Carter was definitely Peggy Carter's niece. And Batroc's voice, Gilly Fenwick, performing a wonderfully over-the-top French accented voice for the character.
He was a decoy. They outsmarted me.
Ah, but that charming mademoiselle.
Goodness, I wish I could grow a moustache as awesome as Batroc. And we're coming up to one of my favourite musical cues in the series, which I spoke about in my previous commentary for the episode of The Mighty Thor. I love the over-the-top drama, the the action. I mean, technically, we see Captain America flying, even though we know he's leaping a mere few feet, but the visual staging creates such drama.
Quickly, Steve Rogers darts into a darkened alley, and from these shadows emerges the most famous costumed Avenger of all time, Captain America.
Look alive, big man.
Capitaine America, I am honored.
Batroc, the Leaper, master of La Savate.
So, when I was a kid, I thought that Captain America's line was Batroc, the Leaper, master of lots of that. As in, lots of that. What exactly that is, I don't know. Then I remember buying the Marvel Universe handbooks in the late 80s, and in the abilities section, Batroc was described as proficient in the art of La Savate. Years later, when I was big into martial arts, I actually took up Savate. It's pretty much what we would all come to know as kickboxing, just far more brutal. But I think that's another reason I like Batroc. He is a master of a martial art, someone that can actually go toe-to-toe with Captain America. I said the word aspirational before with regards to the visuals of these cartoons, and I guess Batroc is someone we could actually be. No superpowers required, just the knowledge of La Savate. And I'm rather good at the French accent, sacre bleu. Another thing about Batroc was his design. Great costume, orange and purple. And he was a big guy too, not a svelte martial artist. And poor Sharon Carter, fleeing from both Batroc and Captain America, slowly being exposed to the deadly effects of Inferno 42. Oh dear. Due to the length of these cartoons, the pace was always gripping, and that's what I still love about them to this day. I love how this episode begins with a... Actually, that's a John Romita splash page. I was actually about to give Jack Kirby yet another shout out. In numerous Tales of Suspense and Tales to Astonish issues, John Romita would do an occasional fill-in with regards to the art chores, probably because, you know, Jack Kirby was illustrating 1 billion other comics at the same time. Not to deviate from the commentary too much, but I've never not been astounded by Jack Kirby's output, especially during the 60s. It always makes me laugh when I see interviews with modern comic book artists who complain about the monthly output schedule, and they're talking about a single issue, 20 or so pages. Kirby was probably illustrating somewhere in the region of a few hundred pages per month. But yes, this third episode features the visuals of John Romita, who early in his career was aiming for a Kirby-esque aesthetic. By the time he was full-time on The Amazing Spider-Man, he really had come into his own. And somewhat amusingly, in the 1980s, both Jack Kirby and John Romita wound up working, for a time, in the animation industry. Speaking of talents, I'll talk about the voice actors for a moment. I've already mentioned Gilly Fenwick, hamming it up with his voice for Batroc, the Leaper. The voice of Captain America was provided by Sandy Becker. It's such a wonderfully heroic voice. The narrator of these Marvel cartoons was, of course, Bernard Cowan, and rounding out the cast for this episode was Vita Linda as the voice of both Peggy and Sharon Carter. It's a real shame that with the Marvel Superheroes cartoon show, even the full end credits with the Merry Marvel Marching Society song didn't have all the actors credited. Thanks to archivists over the years, we fans have been able to learn a great deal about the making of these shows, as sadly Marvel, Disney, doesn't seem to hold any historical value to them, which is a crying shame. I guess whilst we're here, I may as well say that my favourite movie from the Marvel Cinematic Universe is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. I just love that movie. I call it the 1970s spy movie that doesn't know it's a superhero movie. It just has that unique feel to it. And throughout all of his appearances, Steve Rogers felt perfectly portrayed by Chris Evans. And yes, Captain America: The Winter Soldier does indeed feature Batroc. I still remember sitting in the cinema. I hadn't been exposed to any spoilers, and I heard someone say Batroc during the first few minutes of the movie. I turned to my friend and excitedly told him, Batroc can go toe-to-toe with Captain America. And whilst they didn't tap into the character's over-the-top bravado, enough was present that it made me smile, and whilst not a long fight, they did a good job of making Batroc look formidable. Also, and to show that for a time those working on the movies and TV shows actually did their homework, Batroc would eventually be killed by Sharon Carter, whom Batroc causes so much trouble for in this particular episode. And now we're going to see another battle between Captain America and Batroc the Leaper, as the shadowy members of the Secret Empire flee, believing that they are in possession of Inferno 42. Spoiler, they're not. And you'll hear once more that piece of music that I love kick in. It's actually titled Furious Encounter, and it's composed by Ward Sills. The Marvel superheroes shows and the 1967 Spider-Man cartoon used a wealth of music from a variety of libraries. Thus it's been quite a mission for fans to track down the music over the years. Just listen to it, it's so epic.
Down, but not out. He's faking. He'll attack again.
And sadly, although known what vinyl it appears on, Furious Encounter is near impossible to locate. Maybe one day someone will find it, encode it and post it. This battle is over rather quickly, and I feel that after this blow, ouch, that Batroc may be suffering from concussion for a goodly while. I've mentioned before on this channel that I kind of checked out of comic books in the early 2000s, around about 2002, 2003. Prior to that, during the 90s, I recall Batroc being rarely used, almost like he wasn't cool or extreme enough to hang with the gun-toting, brooding, one-eye glowing characters of that particular decade. But from what I've seen in passing, Batroc does appear to have experienced a renaissance of sorts, popping up as a character in numerous comics and animated shows. Granted, he's never presented too seriously, but it does seem that there is still quite a bit of love for the character. And poor Sharon, she's not looking too good, breaking Captain America's heart. As for her fate, go back and read the epic stories, true believer. Fantastic final shot of our hero watching the potential love of his life disappear once more. I've lost her again. I have a feeling she'll be back, Cap. There we go, my second episode commentary for a 1966 Marvel Superheroes cartoon. Next time, methinks it'll be about a certain doctor belted by gamma rays. And that's the end of this episode commentary. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.